Hi guys, it's Debbie, and today I would like to give a complete and easy explanation of The OA, a recent TV series now available on Netflix. Now there are two theories regarding The OA, and I will be explaining both of them, so if you haven't seen this TV series, I would highly recommend not watching the rest of this video because it will be spoiler packed. Now the OA opens with a woman called Prairie surviving a suicide jump off of a bridge. She is then recognised as a woman which had gone missing 7 years before. Prairie is hospitalized and the doctors discover that she has regained her sight, as when she had gone missing 7 years before, she was blind. The doctors also discover some mysterious scars on her shoulders and back, and she admits to the fact that she had been held captive in a room with other people but refuses to say anything to the police because she says they just wouldn't understand her. Also, she claims to not be called Prairie but the OA. After being brought home by her joyful although worried parents, Prairie's erratic behaviour becomes even worse, and she is in obvious psychological distress. Her parents assume this behaviour is due to her traumatic experience and to her known history of psychosis. She uploads a video on the internet in which she asks for help for a mysterious and important mission. With this video, she reaches out to all sorts of people, but in particular to people which are upset or unsatisfied with their life, or which are living or have just lived a particular experience. So we have BBA, a teacher which has recently lost her brother; Buckvu, a teenager transgender in a mainly conservative environment; Steve, which is dealing with his temper and behaviour in school while being threatened by his family to be sent to a boot camp. Then we have Alfonso, a promising student which also works as a waiter and which also has to deal with the pressure of running his household and takes drugs to cope with the stress. And then Jesse, another high schooler whose father has left and mother has recently committed suicide. Prairie meets all these people in an abandoned house and tells them her story night after night. Prairie tells them that she was born in Russia. Her father was very loving but also had an odd way of educating his daughter, for example making her sit in a freezing cold lake in her pyjamas because she's having nightmares. Nina's nightmares are constant and they are very realistic. She feels as if they're nearly premonitions. For example, she has a bad feeling about a recurring dream in which she is trapped in water with crayons floating around her. One day while going to school in a minivan with other kids, the vehicle falls off a high bridge and crashes into the water beneath. In this accident, Prairie has what is called a near-death experience. So for a very small amount of time she was dead, but after that sort of came back to life and survived. Now this is when all the different theories begin. Let's take a look at the main two. The first theory, and the one that the show sort of tries to convey, is that everything that Prairie says is right. It all happened. So according to this theory, when Nina Prairie lost consciousness and had this near-death experience, she entered a sort of multi-dimensional space where a mysterious woman gives her the choice of returning back to Earth, living but also suffering in her future, or just letting go and passing on, so dying. Nina chooses to return back on Earth, and the woman says that in exchange she will have to take Nina's eyes, so her sight. So when she comes back to life, when this near-death experience ends, she is blind. Her father then sends her off to a posh American school for blind children, but after his death she lives with her aunt in an illegal adoption centre. She was then saved by an American couple which adopted her and brought her back to the United States. But she started to show early signs of a severe form of psychosis, which had probably worsened with her traumatic experiences. For example, she was convinced her father was still alive and would talk to her through her dreams, so for years on end her parents stuffed her with medications. But then one day Prairie has a dream in which she meets her father in New York. So she secretly travels all the way to New York, and as she doesn't manage to meet him at the Statue of Liberty, she decides to play her violin in the underground, hoping that he will hear her and meet her. As many people that have suffered a near-death experience, Prairie had developed an artistic talent, and when she plays the violin, her music is extremely deep, emotional, nearly chilling. That day on the underground there is a doctor which for years has studied near-death experiences, and he recognises the style of tune that she is playing and approaches her, explaining his work and offering to study her case. But then in reality he takes advantage of her blindness. So from what we gather, this doctor is obsessed with near-death experiences, and over the years had been capturing people that had lived this experience to then study the effects on the body. In this lab he would also use a toxic gas and would then repeatedly bring them to the point of death, so have repeated near-death experiences. One day Prairie nearly managed to escape, but the doctor reached her, hit her on the back of the head, and so again she lived another near-death experience. In this experience she again entered this multi-dimensional room in which she met again the mysterious woman, and again she was given the choice of dying, passing on, or returning back on Earth. When she chooses to keep on living, the woman gives her a bird and says to swallow it, as it will give her the chance to fly away. After waking up from a near-death experience, Prairie regained her sight. Prairie and the other victims understood that the only way to get out of their enslavement is through their near-death experiences. So they tried to remain focused throughout the doctor's test. They tried to slip into this near-death experience but still remaining conscious, trying to learn as much information possible. As a matter of fact, every time that they came back to life after living a lucid near-death experience, they naturally seem to know certain movements. They understand that a combination of these movements can give them their freedom. So Prairie etches the symbols of these movements onto her skin to not forget them, so that's why she has her scars. And altogether the victims in the laboratory rehearse these movements all day long, preparing for their final freedom. Just with 2 movements they discover they are able to heal people, and with 5 movements they could possibly transform the energy around them and somehow create a portal that would free them, although they don't understand how physically this is going to happen. Prairie also decides to change her name to the OA because something deep down inside of her seems to keep on repeating away, away, which sounds like OA. And she also later explains that this is an acronym for Original Angel, because all the prisoners in the lab feel as if they are angels which can move through different dimensions and save other people. One day the doctor angrily abandons Prairie in the woods after discovering all of her plans, says that he doesn't necessarily need her and that he will force all the other test subjects to travel through dimensions with him because he has also practiced the movements. Prairie was so desperate after this event that she tried to commit suicide by jumping off a bridge in order to try and reach the other victims again. After surviving this suicide attempt, she was hospitalized, and this is the beginning of the film. So Prairie obviously couldn't tell the police about what has happened because nobody would believe her, especially with her history of mental illness. She chooses to tell her story only to the 5 people which respond to her video message and come to meet her in the abandoned house. These people believe her story, and decide to learn all of her movements. But their meetings have to abruptly stop when some parents discover these nighttime meetings. So BBA, which is a teacher, had to resign from her job. Prairie was put back on her medication and was given an ankle monitor. Also, Alfonso finds the books about angels, Russian oligarchs, near-death experiences, meaning that she could have possibly invented everything. Prairie continues to have strange visions, premonitions, and one day she wakes up and realizes what her premonition is, and she runs to the school where there is a shooter opening fire in the school cafeteria. The 5 people she had taught the movements to bravely stand up and circle the shooter and start performing their movements until he is caught by somebody. He manages to fire one last shot which hits Prairie, which was just behind the window, right in the chest. While Prairie is being carried away on an ambulance, Steve feels a sort of whoosh wish, which the doctor had described as an event that happens when somebody is just passing away. So he understands that Prairie is going to meet Homer and all the other test subjects through death, so either through complete death or through a near-death experience. As a matter of fact, at the end of the season, we see an apparently healed Prairie sitting up and saying the word Homer, which means that she could probably be meeting him in a near-death experience. And this is where the season ends. I think this is the mysterious side which the creators have wanted to give to the show in order to enhance the paranormal aspect, but in reality there is a much easier and more realistic explanation, which is the other theory. Viewers have been split into two categories. Some have been following the first theory. I personally have been following this second theory, which I will explain. Now basically with the second theory, during the crash of the minivan from the bridge into the water, Nina Prairie sustained a heavy brain damage which caused her blindness. Now sudden sight loss is not that clinically uncommon as it may seem. Now while she was slipping into unconsciousness underwater, she represented this metaphorical choice of struggling and coming back to life, or just letting go and slipping into death, with the idea of a magic wish giving her the choice. When she was then abducted, there were other people, but just picture this. She is kept enclosed in a glass cage for years, eating what looks like dried dog food, drinking from water from the ground, the same water in which the person in the cell next to her might have just defecated. They are forced to breathe harmful gases on a daily basis, nearly drowned, and all sorts of other tortures, without even a change of clothes, privacy, or a human touch. They are forced to listen to one of the test subjects having sex. When they try to make their voices be heard, the noise is drowned by blaring music. Now think of all of this and think of what the human mind can conceive, can imagine after years and years of living like this, of all the hallucinations it can come up with. And think of Prairie, which is blind, so she doesn't even have the luxury of a visual stimulation. She has a vivid imagination and a severe form of psychosis, and the heavy medication she has been taking for years and years is suddenly interrupted. She could have imagined all sorts of different things. Not everything that we see is reality, most of it is just part of her mind. And also she could have easily regained her sight through a similar blow to her head, like the first one she had received in the accident with the minivan. I think the books were planted into her bedroom by the policeman therapist in order to convince her that a lot of what she thinks happened is part of her imagination. Because if you look at the books, they're extremely new, they hardly look used. Prairie found it difficult to use a computer, but they are in an Amazon box, wrapped in her favourite jumper on the floor, and also she has been blind for most of her life, so I doubt that she would have easily managed to read books without the Braille system. Also, us humans tend to not believe in coincidences and rational thoughts and prefer to believe in premonitions, but in reality it's just pure luck, pure coincidence, and our minds subconsciously collecting a huge amount of information without us even knowing, and it then elaborates it. For example, every single face we see in our dreams is a face that our eyes have seen in real life, although we can't remember it. So we might have a weird dream, a dream we can hardly remember, about maybe something negative, a bomb or an accident. Then a few days later on the news we see a similar incident happening, and our mind starts to fill in the blanks, and we are convinced that we dreamed and saw that exact same thing. And if you look carefully, already a couple of episodes before the ending of the season, we overhear on the news that there had been a lone shooter in a shopping mall which then had managed to escape. So what if Prairie had picked up this information with a lot of other information? Maybe this shooter had some psychological issues and attended her same mental health center, and she just connected all the dots. Also, the shooter stopped simply because he wasn't expecting 5 people jumping and hissing around him, and Steve didn't hear a whoosh. It was simply the trees blowing in the wind. They were actually blowing before the shooter even arrived. He was just influenced by what Prairie told him. And remember, what Prairie says can also not be the truth. No, we have no witnesses of what happened to Prairie. She says she saw a person person coming back from the dead. She said that she healed another person. She learnt movements in near-death experiences, but where are the witnesses? It's not necessarily true because we see it in the series, because what we see in the series is simply everybody imagining her story, Prairie imagining her story. It's not the actual events. And remember, Prairie has had a history of psychosis and had been suffering traumas even years before the doctor abducted her. Remember when she was basically treated like an animal in that illegal adoption centre where women were selling their bodies in the rooms next to her. This is the theory which convinces me the most. There are also some other theories, for example that the doctor is her real doctor and that the other test subjects were just other patients in her mental health clinic. Other people have been saying that Prairie has been imagining all of this in a coma, and her jumping off of the bridge, so committing suicide, actually was her waking up from the coma. I think the creators of the show intended to not leave one complete explanation or the other, but create a combination of different elements in order to then leave the viewer to decide for himself which theory he prefers the best. Let me know what you thought about the OA with a comment here below, and make sure to subscribe for many more movie related videos. See you soon in your video. Bye!